Okay, so in terms of sustainability, where we're at now, I think it's fair to say that we've moved beyond the early stage or the earlier stages, where it's maybe a nice to have, and there was also perhaps some greenwashing out there. We seem to have arrived at a stage where everyone is recognizing that they have to be genuine commitment for their business. And is that a fair assessment? And do you think companies are beginning to get to grips with that requirement to actually demonstrate, provide some evidence, as opposed to saying yes, we are sustainable, actually saying, well, and this is how we're doing it?
Yes, absolutely, Paul. I think there's definitely been a shift, and it's been driven by a number of factors, such as consumer pressure, employees who want to work for organizations whose values resonate with their own, by shareholders and investors who increasingly recognize the value of sustainability on the business's bottom line, and of course, by regulators who are demanding meaningful change and the evidence, as you've mentioned, to support it. So I think sustainability has transformed from a mere cost to a strategic investment. I can share from the Logicalis 2023 Global CIO Survey. There was definitely a shift in perspective among CIOs, with 92% recognizing the clear link between ESG factors, sustainability, and enterprise value. And the same research found that 84% of employees are more likely to work for companies that prioritize environmental issues. So we know that meaningful sustainability doesn't just yield a commercial advantage, as well as cost savings and brand enhancement and long-term viability. We know it has a direct impact on talent attraction. And by bringing all of this together, embracing this shift, businesses can really drive innovation, improve organizational resilience, and contribute to long-term value creation while addressing these pressing global challenges. So yes, I think we're headed in the right direction.
And I guess the IT industry is in, if not a completely unique position, certainly an unusual position, in that a lot of the technology solutions that they are developing or already out there can actually help users or contribute to people's sustainability agendas. I mean, just for example, if we'd had to meet up somewhere physically, I guess our carbon footprint would be significantly greater than doing what we're doing over Zoom. So at one level, the IT industry can be sort of proud that it is helping people on their sustainability journey. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And I think CIOs too are increasingly recognizing that they have a key role to play in sustainability enablement by making deliberate decisions to buy technology that helps them drive business value and ESG performance. And if you're happy, I can share a few examples from Logicalis, because this is something we've been spending a lot of time kind of thinking about and fleshing out. And we have a managed digital fabric platform, as an example, that harnesses data from across an organization's digital infrastructure to deliver insights across key business metrics such as environmental impact. And the platform measures businesses' energy and carbon usage, and shares comprehensive recommendations that they can implement to help achieve sustainability goals. And even through enablement of things like smart buildings that use sensors, which monitor the occupation levels of office buildings, heating and lighting systems to ensure energy usage is optimized where necessary, they can all help improve that environmental performance piece. So I think it's really critical now for organizations to assess their IT vendors on their enabling capabilities and team up with partners that can accelerate their maturity journey, whether that's IT infrastructure vendors, software firms, services firms, or other partners. There's definitely an opportunity here within the IT industry for sure.
But though I suppose we also have to recognize that IT infrastructure, there is an environmental cost. I mean, whether it's mining minerals that end up in servers or whatever, that level, but also it's a power hungry industry, shall we say, all these servers and data centers. So I don't know, I suppose does the industry acknowledge that aspect? Yeah, as I say, it's clearly providing some of the solutions to say, but it is also recognized that it has to, shall we say, pull its socks up in terms of its own sustainability performance.
Yes. It is a power-hungry industry. I know the European Commission predicts that by 2030, data centers are projected to account for 3.2% of electricity demand within the EU, which is a jump from 2.7% in 2018. So it really reinforces that the efficiency of hardware and the sources they are powered by can make a significant impact on an organization's carbon footprint. So yes, I think building sustainability into decision making linked to IT infrastructure is crucial if we're going to make progress in this space.
Okay, and then if we can focus a little bit more on Logicalis and your own sort of approach, I believe you have identified three key pillars in terms of the way you address the sustainability situation, and perhaps you can say a little bit about each. So I think the first one is people. So if you can just expand on what that means.
Yes, absolutely. And to take a step back, how this came to life was we had to look really carefully at our business and our ecosystem and our key stakeholders. And we conducted a materiality assessment, essentially. So what aspects of ESG are material to our business and how can we have the most impact in these various spaces? And that's what culminated in this three-pronged strategy. And our people is kind of what I believe is the heart of what we do. And myself, my team, the responsible business function, we work with our HR teams across the world on aspects such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employee well-being. So we have a commitment to supporting a diverse and inclusive workforce. We have the Global Inclusion Council at Logicalis, which are made up of senior leaders from across the business who come together to identify opportunities to deepen our impact in the space of DE&I within our business. And this came to be one of the first things that I found when I came into the business was our HR teams were saying to me, Charissa, we want to be able to recruit more diversely, but the pool that we're drawing from is so small, is when we're getting job applications, it's very limited. And so that immediately represented an opportunity for us from a DE&I perspective, but also in terms of the next pillar, which is our communities. So we really wanted to think carefully about the impact we were having across the organization around our community engagement. So there was lots of really good work, people well-intentioned, doing everything from painting classrooms to volunteering at the pet shelter. But this was an opportunity to bring together these well-intentioned initiatives and direct them to a common goal to deepen our impact as an organization. So being a technology company, we decided as Logicalis that we would support initiatives in education in STEM, primarily to support women and minority groups to come into the technology industry. So not only are we kind of empowering the communities around where we work, we're also creating that pipeline to recruit more diversely in the future. So we have a commitment to implement a minimum of 30 strategic education projects across the group by 2025. And we really want to create these opportunities and vehicles for women and minority groups to come into the industry. And finally, our third pillar is around our planet. And that's gotten, I think, a lot of airtime and a lot of positive recognition over the last few years, because we've really worked hard to deepen what we're doing around our environmental performance, creating a healthier planet, reducing our own and our the emissions along our supply chain, which we can go into in a minute. But all of that, I think it's really important for me, Phil, to share that it had to be underlain by a strong governance structure. So, you know, a lot of people think of ESG, the environment, the social, and the governance. And for us at Logicalis, that governance has to run through everything we do. And so I don't see it as a standalone pillar. It's something that guides everything we do across the organization. And we ensure that we're aligning to the global benchmarks and frameworks that we need to enable us to move our strategy forward and to create value and meaningful change.
A bit more detail. How much of what you've described is sort of set in stone in a set of rules that you hand out to all your employees and you know, supply chain, etc. This is what you have to do, and how much is it sort of an objective, and then you're to a certain extent leaving it up to your employees and you know, wider ecosystem to come to you with ideas to make it happen. I suppose, yeah. What do you insist on, and what's there for people to bring back to you as why don't we do this, if you like?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. We have a team of employees across 27 countries across the world. And so it's really important that we have that innovation piece, that we leave it in the hands of our employees to come up with projects that are contextually relevant, that are meaningful to them and to the businesses and to their operations. But at a group level, we have had to set kind of the broader goals. So around diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, the Global Inclusion Council is tasked with looking within the business doing peer benchmarking, considering the materiality assessment, and identifying our overarching goals. And we have goals linked to recruiting more diversely globally, for example, increasing the number of women in leadership positions, providing more opportunities for training and learning and engagement around DE&I. But how that is brought to life and executed at an operational level is up to those teams at the operations. Similarly, around community engagement, we have that directive to support projects linked to STEM education. And we have a global mandate to have at least 50% of our beneficiaries be women or minority groups. And again, it's up to the teams at the operational level to go out to meet with local nonprofit organizations. We, at a group level, we help do the due diligence on those organizations to ensure they're aligned to our strategy and to what we're trying to achieve. But that team then engages with that organization. Employees at the operation volunteer their time to mentor women and girls in that country, for example. So they're the ones who really decide what's going to be of most value and what works for them. And similarly, around our planet, we have made commitments at Logicalis to be a carbon neutral global organization by 2025. We have commitments to the science-based targets around net zero and reducing our emissions. So we know that globally we are aiming to achieve these goals. But again, we put a call out to our operations to come up with innovative projects to reduce emissions, as an example. So we have a global sustainability challenge every year. We provide both the guidelines and the budget for implementing those projects. But what's going to work at the office level is completely up to the teams who are going to be implementing them. So it's really a combination of here's what we're working to achieve as a global organization, but all of that really good stuff comes from the people who are working on the ground.
And presumably internally, because as you say, across the globe, people will be doing different things, but there's a mechanism to share sort of best practice or things that work, so that, you know, if it works over here, people elsewhere in the company have the opportunity to understand that and maybe implement it where they are. Is that pretty much part of it as well?
Definitely. We really work hard to communicate across the group what we're doing, what's working. But one of the mechanisms through which we do that and has been working really well is we've established an environmental council for Logicalis. So the environmental council meets every 8 weeks, and we have representatives from across the globe who come to that council, and it's really a platform for sharing, for identifying what's working really well and for replicating that. We really don't want everybody to be working in a silo and reinventing the wheel. We have so much good work that's happening across the group, and we want to be able to share and bring that to life everywhere. So the council is one of the ways in which we do that.
Okay, and in terms of sort of practical achievements to date and maybe other things that are in the pipeline, be good to, you know, I know sort of environmental how should I say, progress is often measured in terms of scopes 1, 2, and 3. I know there are other aspects, but as a way of measuring at least. So in terms of scopes 1 and 2, are you able to share some of the practical things that Logicalis has done, and maybe anything, you know, some of the projects that are still to be implemented?
Yes, of course. One of the very first things we had to work very hard to do, and it took us a good 2 years, I think, before we were confident enough to say that we had a baseline of carbon emissions. So the very first thing I want to share is establishing that that baseline of carbon emissions was crucial. And it was around having all of Logicalis's operating regions reporting to the Carbon Disclosure Project. So we used the CDP as our platform for collecting and reporting on that data. So that was an essential first step. What that enabled us to do is to see how we were tracking on scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3 emissions as much as we could at that time across the world. And it allowed us to then think about not only what targets we were setting, but how we were going to create a plan for meeting those targets. Because I think a lot of organizations have gotten a bit of pushback around setting net zero targets and then having to pull them back because they didn't have a plan in place. And we were very careful to ensure we modeled against our baseline what our year-on-year reductions would be to enable us to reach our targets. So we have officially committed to the Science-Based Targets Initiative Corporate Net Zero Standard, which is the world's first framework for corporate net zero target setting in line with climate science. They've been submitted to SBTi for formal validation, which we should be getting any minute now, which is great. I think one of the key things we've done internally to enable us to meet our goals around renewable energy switches, which I'll talk to now, are the introduction of sustainability KPIs for members of the executive team. And these KPIs are linked to renewable energy and ESG reporting targets. And I think that is probably one of the biggest steps we took in 2023 to really drive home the fact that this work is crucial for how we do business and that meeting our commitments is essential. So our commitment was to have at least 25% of global operations powered by renewable energy in FY23. And I think because it was linked to KPIs then, the goal was achieved. And by the end of FY23, Logicalis had 5 of our global operations achieving a switch to renewable energy. And it was really, the idea was by continuing to do this, we could support the implementation of our decarbonization strategy. So we have a year-on-year decarbonization strategy with specific targets for every region around emission reduction and renewable energy switches. A big part of this is to drive home the fact that we have to implement carbon reduction projects. It has to become a way of working for us. So we implemented or continued more than 35 environmental projects across our global operations in the last 2 years. And it's all linked as well to our commitment to be carbon neutral. So although carbon neutral means we could just buy carbon offsets next year and be carbon neutral without doing anything else, we know that that's not what we want to do as our primary means of achieving carbon neutrality. So the first thing we want to do is continue to ensure we're on track with reducing our emissions. We will then purchase offsets as we need to be carbon neutral in 2025. But each year following that, our emissions are, what our strategy is to reduce our emissions, to reduce the cost of offsetting so that we can eventually be net zero. And that's essentially what we've been doing for the last 2 years and what we're projected to do all the way to hopefully before 2050, where we've committed to be net zero.
And in terms of the scope 3 emissions, which are slightly less in your control, Charissa, although obviously if every company is addressing their own carbon footprint, then they'll be, hopefully doing their own scopes 1 and 2, which are your supply chain scope 3s, I suppose, if that makes sense. But how much pressure influence do you put on your supply chain? Do you find they're at different stages in their own net zero sustainability journeys? And I'll say, how much of the carrot versus stick, shall we say, approach do you use? I mean, are there some no-nos? You tell them, if you haven't done this by this date, then we're potentially going to have to look for another supply. What sort of conversation, I guess, do you have with the supply chain?
Yeah, it's a combination, I'd say, of the carrot and the stick. And what we found along our supply chain so far is that different organizations are, you're absolutely right, at different levels of maturity. But one of our commitments to the Science Based Targets Initiative is to have 85% of our top suppliers by spend have their own science-based targets by 2028. And our commitment is to work together with all of the organizations along that supply chain to accelerate our mutual sustainability goals. Because you're absolutely right, we have to be in it together for it to work. So one of the ways we're seeking to do this is through the continued implementation of our sustainable procurement policy. We launched it last year, and in that policy, we specify the values and requirements to do business with us as Logicalis. We've linked that to a questionnaire, which we're using to ascertain where our top suppliers are in their sustainability journeys and where the opportunities exist to support each other. So it's really about, here's what we stand for, here's what we're not compromising on, but let's have that conversation and go on this journey together and see where opportunities lie. We also completed a group-wide Scope 3 assessment to understand our broader value chain impacts and to identify which categories of Scope 3 emissions we do have some direct control over. And this exercise is what led us to prioritize tackling our waste and our business travel, which are sometimes overlooked. Although they're smaller contributors to our overall Scope 3, it was really important to us to feel like there are some things we could start to tackle and to make changes on within our business. So At Logicalis, to tackle waste, we're guided by a global e-waste policy, which encourages our teams to adopt a circular economy mindset to reduce waste and minimize the environmental impact of IT operations by reusing and repurposing IT equipment instead of disposing of it. And this work will be expanded to include general waste in the coming year. Another really exciting part of our Scope 3 emissions and tackling those emissions was around sustainable travel. So we launched a sustainable travel policy also last year and recently partnered with a global travel platform called Route Zero. Route Zero uses machine learning technology to calculate the most sustainable method of travel. So we really wanted to empower our employees to make sustainable travel choices. Encouragingly, we coupled this with this policy. So coupling the policy and the platform and piloting it with our group team has actually led to more travel, with the number of journeys up 23% from our baseline the year before. But our emissions over the previous year are down 26%, and we haven't broken our financial budget. So our costs have also been kept in check. So we're finding that the combination of a policy, but a practical way to implement the policy is really proving to be worthwhile. And we're going to be expanding that to the rest of the group in the coming year. So I'd really encourage companies to take a similar approach to identify which categories of Scope 3 emissions are most material to your business, and then develop a systematic approach for tackling them.
Again, maybe the final piece of the jigsaw, so there's obviously yourselves, the supply chain, and then there's the customers, the end users, somewhere along there. And what sort of obligation do you feel you have in terms of helping them? I mean, presumably most of them have got some kind of sustainability roadmaps. And when it comes to helping them with their solutions, do you kind of push sustainable, or say, okay, you've asked for this, but if we get it this way, it'd be more sustainable? I suppose what I'm saying is, how much or little is sustainability part of a conversation when it comes to helping an end user, whether it's via the channel or direct with the end user? What message do you put out there, or do you wait for them to come to you? Just how does it work?
Sure. It's a combination. So I'm finding that in our RFPs and tenders, increasingly there is now a section for sustainability and ESG. So it's something that is most definitely on our customers' radar, which has also enabled us to have more conversations about sustainability in terms of the solutions that we offer as a business. So I'd say sustainability has rapidly become part of the fabric of how we do business at Logicalis. And to help other businesses in our ecosystem on their journey, we really wanted to think about what kind of offerings we could bring, how we could create a platform for sharing and for learning and for, again, kind of replicating best practice. So one of the first things we've done is launched a series of LinkedIn Live webinars in which we provide a platform for some of our sustainability partners to discuss different aspects of sustainability. So, for example, in our first webinar, we talked about, science-based targets and how to navigate to net zero. Now, in our last webinar, we interviewed the CEO of Route Zero to discuss Scope 3 emissions linked to business travel. So I'd encourage your viewers and listeners to please check them out on the Logicalis page. But we've also developed and are developing a number of solutions for our customers to support them on their journeys. And one of those is our managed digital fabric platform. I had mentioned it earlier, but it was designed to give CEOs a real-time view of how the entire digital ecosystem is performing across 5 metrics, including sustainability, security, user experience, and economics. And it's benchmarked across industry standards. So we recently updated this to provide more detailed insights, greater transparency, and actionable AI-powered recommendations. So this is one of the ways in which we're going to customers and saying, here's a solution that can help you on your journey too. It's one of the solutions that led to Logicalis' receipt of the Cisco Sustainability Partner of the Year award last year. So yes, it's one of those things we do kind of push and highlight and bring to customers to say, while we recognize you're asking the questions from RFPs and tenders, we also have a suite of solutions that can help you on your journey. So that kind of combination of approaches, I think, is what's currently working for us.
Okay, and maybe in conclusion, this is probably a difficult one to answer simply, but clearly there is there seems to be an overwhelming momentum now towards sustainability and net zero, and yet you pick up certain papers or watch certain media, and there's sort of pushback, and even the sort of conspiracy theories that we're getting pushed to net zero for various underhand reasons, which is at the very least muddying the waters. So do you come across any resistance, shall we say, from companies or individuals saying, oh no, this whole net zero thing, it's still a conspiracy theory, and the planet isn't warming up? Or do you think most people have got beyond that stage? Or say, do you worry that whether it's politically or whatever, there are sort of mixed messages being put out there that are not helpful to the sustainability cause?
Of course, I think there is absolutely some pushback here and there. Excuse me. I think anything that is going to cost money, that requires a change in how we've worked for many, many years, is going to come with some resistance. But I am broadly optimistic, Phil. I think those organizations that are lagging behind will be compelled to comply with sustainability reporting requirements in the near future. And as more organizations recognize the value of sustainability beyond just compliance, we're bound to gain momentum toward achieving a sustainable future. So I think there will always be pockets of resistance, but we're kind of at this intersection now of technology and sustainability, and we have the opportunity to drive significant change that can benefit not only our businesses, but also the world at large. So it's really up to everybody to kind of jump on and get moving with it, because if you don't do it now, you're going to have to do it soon enough.
Okay, it's been great to chat to you, Charissa, and some lovely insights into what's going on both at Logicalis and your thoughts sort of more generally. So really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me, Phil.